So hello and welcome to this video with the Endorphin.es Grand Terminal. This video is in depth. There's timing index below with links to skip through the sections, but first let's check out some previews of what's to come. So the module's based around this endorphins airways idea. We have an aeroplane A, an aeroplane B, gates, exits, and all these little analogies for planes, takeoff time, landing time, all this kind of thing. But simply, it's two function generators, two filters or low-pass gate emulations, and an effects section. So simple, but there's a lot of complex and interesting, great sounding things to be had with a couple of button combos throughout. The function generators can loop and go up to be oscillators. There's a key in for those to track volt per octave. We can have a triggered takeoff and landing, or rise and fall, or a hold, a kind of takeoff, cruise and fall, or attack, hold, release, however you want to look at it. We can control the shape with these two knobs of the rise or takeoff and landing or fall or decay or release. That's the same on this side. We get unipolar and bipolar outputs. There's a check-in to gate this. And again, same on that side. And these function generators are available on those exits. As I said, unipolar or bipolar. We have two filters, each with 8 filter types, be it a Moog style, low pass ladder, a more acidic, saturated 3-pole low pass like what you'd find in a 303. We've got some low pass gate emulations, a great state variable filter with high, low and band pass, and a great comb for flangery chorus like effects. We then come up to the cabin pressure section where we get a dry wet and a main parameter control for effects. We can hold that and get a second one. We can clock these or CV them. We can CV the dry wet. There's a mono out, which is modular level, and a stereo headphone out. And this is a bit lower in level than modular, but because there's some extra gain on here, I've just been taking this stereo out with the provided splitter cable just straight into my modular system. But this will drive headphones nicely, go straight into a mixer or PA, and it works great as a back end for everything. The filters can be completely independent, in parallel, in series through each other, or in stereo, and that passes up to this section. The effects are stereo as well. Some of those have a width control. We've got rooms, plates, shimmer verbs, halls, a great spring emulation. There's a ping pong delay, a great tape echo emulation that's got this lovely modulated driven sound, and a freezer effect as well, where we can hold and loop and buffer repeat and mangle buffer size and buffer time and pitch. Gateway, the expander, breaks out jumpers from the back of the module, which would change the behaviour of the CV-ins so that they could be for duration or shape for the function generators. There's also a tune function, which allows you to do some tuning and auto-tune, and it provides a CV that you can mix and offset to keep things in tune, which works great as well. We get an offset generator, so if you wanted to offset a function and patch it back in, you could. We'll get into the expander in the back of the video. There's a lot to get through. The manual's fantastic, so I will link that below as well. I'll link the manual for Gateway too. I'm going to pull some of the graphics from the manual. which are really helpful, and they're going to come up on screen throughout the video. But just a quick word on the filters, and we're going to spend a long time listening to these filters because they are digital, but they sound fantastic. And since the most recent update, all the Grand Terminal filter types have obtained a so-called zero delay nature. And zero delay filters are fairly recent in terms of DSP research over the past few years. And this is in virtual analog synths like the U-He Diva or Reactor Blocks, and there's many more. Andreas at Endorphin sent me a little note about this that I've got on screen, and he sent me some links to some extra reading and some more material on the topic by Urs Heckman himself. So they sound fantastic. I've not noticed that they're not analog. They saturate and resonate in the same kind of way. So that's quite a long introduction, but there's a lot to get through. Timing index below for you to skip around. Let's check out the module. So to start with, we'll look at a very typical use for filters, which is nice deep saw wave coming in. That's the green trace on data. Simple single oscillator. We go into the gates. Coming out of the mono out. The first mode is a transistor ladder filter, and we'll go through all these filter modes, have some sweeps around, we'll quickly modulate them before getting into other patches. So a transistor ladder filter is a 24 dB per octave low pass filter modelled after the famous Mini-Moog filter. It's got a rich slope and a deep bass sound, and it self-oscillates at full resonance with that recognisable chicken peep timbre when being modulated. And you can hear it's got that great, smooth, deep kind of ladder sound. Let's add some resonance. Nice vocal resonance. We change filter mode, which is indicated down here, with these follow buttons. And the second one is a diode ladder filter. And this is an 18 dB per octave low-pass filter inspired by the Roland TB303 and the EMS SYNTH VOICE filters. It gives a distinct acid feel, and it suits techno arpeggios and bass sounds according to the manual. So let's check this one out. Bit more driven, bit richer in the mids. Let's add some res. It's got the nice croaky, acidic res. So the next mode is a Vactral low-pass gate, and this has a 12 dB per octave response, which is modelled on the Buchla low-pass gates that use the filter and VCA combination to get that low-pass gate. It simulates a non-resonant Vactral filter mode, this one. There is a resonant one coming up next. But instead of resonance here, the resonance serves as a decay. So we can change the response, that lag, that kind of gorgeous organicness that Vactrals and low-pass gates have. Now if I turn this right up, you can see it rings. As soon as I've got my hand off, this should be off all the way left. And we'll see that on the modulation shortly. The fourth mode is a resonant low-pass gate. It's just a variation on the previous version, but we get resonance control as well. So kind of a different taste on the low-pass filters there once we add that resonance back in. Now the fifth mode, and these 4 LEDs, it will go back to 1 and it will be dimmer. So notice 4 dim LEDs, 4 bright. Mode 5, the first dim one, is a state variable low pass. And this is a 12 dB per octave response. Unlike ladder and diode filter types, the sound is less harmonically rich, but it's got a much cleaner sound and a much flatter cut-off slope. And this type of filter has been used by Oberheim in the Korg MS-10 and 20, and it also features resonance with loudness compensation, because usually with more resonance amplitude decreases, it doesn't here. Still got a great resonance sound though. We then have a high pass. Again, this is state variable. With resonance all the way down and the high pass filter all the way up, it does silence. It's got that lovely vocal response as the resonance starts pulling into those harmonics. Sing-song harmonics, Nick Batt from Sonic State would say. And a state variable bypass. And the control here determines the center point of that bandpass filter, the cutoff, and this determines the width. And resonance control. Now the last mode is a comb filter, and this creates a series of harmonically related notch filters. Looking at this on an audio spectrum, it looks like a comb, which is where the name was derived. In a static state, it's similar to a phaser, but with modulation, it comes closer to a flanger. And when you crank up the resonance, it creates ringing and resonating timbres. But that can also be useful for more mellow, Roland Juno-like leads and pads. So going back to the first filter mode, let's quickly patch up the function generators to work as envelopes or LFOs, looping functions or looping envelopes, and just hear these under modulation. So I've patched the gate into the check-in input, and I'm taking the Unipolar positive only envelope out or function generator out into the filter. The cutoff now becomes a CV attenuator for this input. And let's just play around with the gates and the time and listen to these filters. I'm going to move over to the diode ladder. Notice the difference between this Moog ladder, transistor ladder style filter on mode 1 and the diode ladder on mode 2. More driven. Going over to the first low pass gate mode, I'm going to turn down resonance, which is now the decay, the lag, the response of the simulated Vactral. So we're adding this Vactral style ring. So even with really tight, shortest envelope I can get, you can simulate plucking low pass gates. The fourth mode adds resonance. Here's the state variable low pass. Just going to set this looping for the high pass. And band pass. And mixing this with a dry signal creates some great phaser-like tones. And here's the comb. As the manual stated, quite flanger-like under modulation. We can audio rate modulate these. amongst a whole other host of things. So let's get into some more musical patches to demonstrate these filters. So here's a little synth line. It's the same saw wave oscillator coming in to the Grand Terminal. I'm using the function, which is gated as an envelope to modulate filter cutoff. Some drums in the background that you can hear now. And let's just have a quick play around. I'm going to go through the various filter modes and we'll see the differences and hear how it sounds. And at this point, I'm going to add some of the effects, which we will look at later. To the diode ladder. Lovely and acidic. Low pass gate. Resonant low pass gate. The state variable low pass. High pass. Band pass. And let's make this loop for the comb. So let's check out these filters over the drums instead. So I've zoomed right in so you can see these filter modes on the left-hand filter, the A and the B. We're using the A as we were before. Over some drum sounds. Cutoff, resonance. When it's most bright, it is modes 1 to 4. And when it's dimmer, it's modes 5 to 8. So let's check it out over some drums. Just manually moving the low pass gate modes doesn't really offer us that much, so I'll skip those. And the high pass is great, really kind of cutting into those drum sounds and with no resonance, actually zeroing out and silencing at the top. And let's just modulate the comb. So here we're going to look at the filter routing options, and this is selected by pressing the 2 mode buttons. So instead of just pressing them to move through the various filter modes, as you would on either of them, we press and hold both together. Now when the LED is off, this is dual mode. Gate A and filter A and B work completely independently. Holding it with a red LED, filter A now controls both filters. And it's in stereo, and these will stay in stereo. This filter hard left, this filter hard right, going into the effects section in stereo. And we're going to come to stereo in a minute. We're still just coming out mono. The third option, and the green LED, is to route these in series. Now I'm going to do the MS-20 dual filter style setup, which would be high pass into a low pass. There's a lot of ways and reasons why you'd want to do this. First being able to boost the bass with a high pass, which seems counterintuitive because the high pass is going to remove low frequencies. But if we get the resonance right at the point of the fundamental tones that we're putting into the input, we can boost the bass. So here's my input just as is. High pass all the way down, low pass all the way up. And as you'd expect, high pass removes frequencies lower than the cutoff. However, add some resonance, and you might need headphones or decent speakers for this. There we go, we're getting a lot of bass boost. And that's going to push more weight and energy and low end into the low pass. Giving that a lot of room to play with. Let's get our envelope and get the signal in to modulate the low pass. Let's play around with the high pass. Now we could put the volt per octave into the high pass's CV input. You can hear this resonant peak is now tracking. There's lots of other cool effects that can be had, like running the comb as a flanger into a bandpass over droning waves. So here we're going to look at using the two filters in stereo. Now, let's first address the output section. We've been using this mono modular level out throughout the video. Perfectly fine. Sums down these two into mono if you were using the stereo mode. We've also got the stereo out, which I'm using with the splitter that comes with the module. Now this is line level, it's also safe to drive headphones, so it's a little bit lower than modular, but I've still got it coming into my modular mixer, totally fine, noise free, working great. But you could just go headphones straight in, and the Grand Terminal's fantastic as a just back end of a whole thing, you know, stereo filtering, stereo low pass gates, some stereo effects out to your recording device, or PA, or whatever you're doing. So, coming out in stereo, we hold these two follow me buttons as we've seen to get into the in series mode where we can process one filter and then out of that filter into the other. When this is red, it's in stereo, and the left hand gate A controls both inputs. So effects are down, there's no modulation currently, low resonance. Let's just hear the stereo input that I've got. Now this is two digital oscillators, both modulated independently. Let's quickly just skip through the filters, but I won't do all of them. Low pass gate emulation's nice, state variable, bit of res. Resonant high pass. Band. And that cool flangery comb effect. So notice that both of these LEDs change for the filter type. Let's get a sequence into my oscillators. I'm already gating this function generator, which we'll use to modulate cutoff. So let's get my sequence in. And let's modulate the cutoff. Bit of reverb. Sounds great. And let's modulate this function generator. And I'll just quickly mention the jumper's on the back of the module, and we'll look at this later in the video, but they break out onto the expander, the gateway. And I can turn this looping envelope, which is the blue trace on data, this one modulating cutoff is the green trace. I can turn this from modulating duration or shape. So this is going to move through exponential and linear shapes. We can see in here that change, or log shapes when I modulate to the right. Or we can make this CV input be the duration of that stage, the fall or the decay or the landing. It's really handy on the expander just to have them on switches, but you can of course set this on the jumpers and forget, and we'll look at this later in the video. So stereo in by holding this together until it's red. You can check that these are panned hard left and right by just holding one of the buttons, and then when we turn these knobs, it shows us these hard panning or panning into the center. Out, hard left and right, center, some down in mono. When we come out of this mode, this will wait until it goes through the value it was set to before it picks up, so there's no nasty jumping if you're popping in and out of this setting by holding the button. So that's it for filtering. Let's take a more detailed look at the effects section, and then we'll come on to the function generators and the expander later on in the video. So in this part of the video, we're going to check out the cabin pressure effects processor, which is this section. Cabin pressure is dry wet, and it has a CV. Type selects the effect, which changes on these LEDs for the 8 effects. We have cabin fever, which is a parameter for the effect. A tap, which we can hold to get into the second parameter on that knob, and a CV in, which can be a clock or delay time and LFO modulation, or CV over the decay of a reverb. It does various things in different modes. So the first mode and the first effect is a hall reverb. Big, clean, huge, almost infinite ambience from this thing. So dry wet up full. By default, this is the length of the reverb. It does this gorgeous kind of infinite freeze. It's gonna just keep going, so if I back this off, let that decay away, bring the filter back up over my audio. Holding tap, you'll see the light flickers. This becomes a high pass filter. Go back to the main mode. You could hear that low end come in as I brought that back down. The next mode is a shimmer. You see this change. And you can hear the modulation in this one. Holding to get in the second mode. And there's that pitch shift. Back to control reverb time. The third effect mode is a stereo room. that gives us control. And it's a great reflective kind of short room. And you just want some stereo life out of the sound. Mono in, stereo out here. Holding tap to get the secondary function. It becomes a stereo width control. Mono to the left. And certainly if you've got headphones on, you're going to hear that open up nice and wide stereo reverb. The fourth mode is a plate reverb, and it's got a really distinct sound that gets the vibrations from a big metal sheet. If you've seen a plate reverb or you know what one is, let's try that. And it's very like pingy and reflective at the start. Again, another unique character. Holding tap, the secondary function here is a high pass filter. And the fifth mode is a spring reverb that's got its own unique sound from the diffusion of a metal spring. And you can hear that classic guitar amp twang of the spring reverb. And this controls the excitement of that spring. You don't usually get, well, certainly real springs don't decay this long, so it's really nice that this is pushed. It's got this great mechanical feedback-like sound, like bowing the spring itself, and it's really nice that that's in there. It's a totally different reverb colour. We can, just filtering down my audio, hit tap, which is like a manual exciter, pluck in the spring. Now just be warned, that'll be pretty loud, as it is for anyone that's ever plucked a real spring in a spring reverb. You can do that manual excitement of the spring with a CV input as well. For the other modes that we've seen so far, the CV in is CV modulation for the primary mode. So reverb length instead of high pass filtering in those reverbs, for example. Mode 6 is a ping pong delay. And straight away, I've got headphones on, you can hear this echo around. The CV input here becomes a clock input. So let's clock it. And we get feedback of the delay. It's got really nice delay trails. Holding tap takes us into a clock divider for the clock. Go longer. Back to that feedback again. Mode 7 is a tape echo, and this is a recreation of the variable tape speed echo with 3 fixed playback heads inspired by the Roland RE201 Space Echo with its warm saturation, and that's all emulated as well, so it's a nice warm sounding delay. This is still a clock input for the delay, so let's hear it. And it's just got that lovely wobbly tape thing going on its ears. Now the primary function there is tape speed. The secondary cabin feature function again is the ability to change the clock division. But you're playing around with the speed and the clock in this mode. It's got that great warm wobbly tape thing going on. It's great. The final mode, and this is new in the latest firmware, is a buffer repeater looper stuttering style effect. So let's just remove this. This isn't going to do anything until we activate the effect, and we do that with a gate into CV in or by holding tap to perform live loopable stutter buffer repeat style effects. The left control is pitch, and this is the window size, the kind of grain that you're shifting around. So let's get some different sounds into this to hear the effects in different context before we move on to the function generators and the expander. So we've got some drums, so we can hear how the effects sound, and we'll skip through much faster than the previous part of the video where we went a bit more in depth with primary and secondary functions for cabin fever and so on. So let's start with the hall reverb. Shimmer verb. We can hear that pitch tail. That's quite common on pitch shifted shimmer reverbs. Room reverb. And I like the short room here just for creating space. Everything just sits quite nicely in that room. Can of course be much bigger. Plate. You can hear the reflections and the echo and the kind of ping pong in that verb. Spring reverb. Again, this is a nice one with shorter reverb times, just to kind of sit and create space in stereo and around whatever you put in. That feedbacky, metallic, mechanical sound that it's got when it's really extended in time is great though. Ping pong delay. We could clock this in time. Tape delay. Tape speed for the primary control. great, warm, saturated sounding tape delay emulation. Finally, the buffer repeat freezer effect. So that's just a quick look at the effects with the drums as well. So we're going to take a look at the function generators, and we're just going to look at airplane A. Now we have our check-in, which is our gate input, our trip selector switch, which is selecting looping, just triggered two-stage envelopes, rises and falls, takeoffs and landings, attack and releases, or a gated and held like AHR or takeoff, autopilot, land. I do like the plane analogies. When we've got takeoff time, attack or rise, we've got landing time, release, fall, decay, and we've got shape controls. So if we set this looping, it's going out into data so we can see the signal, and it's also modulating my wavetable position with my oscillator at the input and the filter cutoff on the gate around the Grand Terminal. Let's plug in my signal. And we've got the bipolar, just touched the cable. We've got the bipolar out and the unipolar out. I'm going to use the unipolar. Speed this up a bit. Now let's play with the shape of the takeoff time, the rise or the attack. We can make that really tight and exponential, through to linear, and a log, which feels like a faster on and off. Same for decay. Tight exponential drop, linear, and log. We can get those nice tight decaying envelopes. This will enter into audio rates. We have a key in for key tracking as well. An end of stages output, which is great for linking at the other side of the Grand Terminal or other modules. Now let's plug a gate signal in. And this middle position on the trip selector switch is just triggered. It ignores gate time. But to the right, it's passing through that gate signal. This will still add a takeoff time or a rise or attack. And this will add a release to the end of the gate. Now these two bottom inputs are for CV, and this can be for the shape or for the duration of that stage, the takeoff, attack or rise, the landing, decay, release or fall. And you select that by a jumper on the back of the module or with the expander, both of which we'll look at shortly. When this is looping, like that, we can re-trigger it with the check-in. There's a lot of great content in the manual about these function generators. Let's check it out as an oscillator though, and see if we can get a full synth voice out of the Grand Terminal. So here we're going to check out the Grand Terminal as an oscillator, and then as a full synth voice on its own. Now this is looping. It's coming out into data and then back into gate A for some filtering. But the filters are wide open, the effects are fully down. So as I turn up the rate, it's oscillating. It goes high enough to go up into audio rates. Now you can do triangles, saw-like waves, bend the exponential and log shaping on each stage. You can also do some interesting sync effects like you would on an analog oscillator, because check-in is always going to re-sync and reset the wave generation in the looping mode. So there's some resync effects to be had as well. Through the filters, low pass, high pass in the series filters mode that we've seen already in the video. We can use key in to track pitch. So let's put a sequence in. Got a nice saw-like wave there. It's a bit hard to see now it's moving, but log like saw, exponential, straight line. Let's try resyncing this. There's great sync overtones. I'm going to sweep the pitch of the syncing oscillator. Oof, that's quite nice. Gives the filter loads to chew on. So to build up the voice, I'm going to gate aeroplane B, the second function generator. Let's take the unipolar out into the filter. I'm going to get rid of sync for now. Bit of tape echo, because it sounds so good, so why not? And there's our synth voice. So for this final part of the video, I want to talk about Gateway, the expander for the Grand Terminal. And there's also more that the Grand Terminal can do with or without the Gateway that I want to go through as well. So the first and foremost thing that I found really useful with the Gateway expander is to break out the jumper settings for these inputs for each aeroplane or function generator. We can switch from controlling the shape of the takeoff and landing or rise and fall to control the duration, the time of takeoff and landing, or the rise and the fall, which is super useful to have on switches on the fly in a bigger system. But if you're worried about expanding and making the system too big, just set it on the jumpers how you like. There are images telling you how to do that in the manual that I'll put on screen now. There's also images showing you how to connect these two modules, which is just ribbon cables around the back, which I'll put images on screen now as well. There's also some offset generators, and we could patch function generators out and into the filter. So if you've been thinking through this video, this filter's cutoff's great, but it becomes an attenuator for these, and I want to be able to offset it. We can come out and back across and offset these function generators back into themselves, or to go anywhere else. It's just a great CV utility to have. There's also a tuning function, which works similarly to the further generator, the complex oscillator from Endorphins. And all of this is outlined in the manual. The expander's there, breaks all this stuff out onto handy switches and inputs and some extra features, but you can also set a lot of this on jumpers as well. And a quick read of the manual will help you set the module up to cater for whatever you want. There's other things like being able to add drive and input gain at the filter stage to add a lot of saturation and clipping, which has sounded great when I've tried it out. We can also scan through the effects with CV. We can scan through the filter types by CV. There's a ton of stuff in the manual. It's all laid out. The graphics are fantastic. It's there. So go check it out if you're wanting to explore even more with this thing. I spent a lot of time on the filters, which have sounded fantastic the way that they work, and the effects have sounded great as well. Function generators have worked really well. I'm kind of blown away by it. It's a fantastic module. So thanks for Endorphins for the module, because it's one that's kind of going to work as a back end for my system, I think, for quite a while. Hit like, subscribe, comment, go support me wherever you want. You can support me on Patreon if you want extra content and support this content. If not, keep liking, sharing, all the usual stuff. That's my standard patter at the end over. Thanks for watching.